In the last week, I have had two incidents with banks where they have had issues with their US dollar sending and receiving ability, essentially their correspondent banking. And it's an interesting challenge that is in the world that really makes me think more and more that people should consider abandoning the US dollar. So I'm going to talk today about what's going on, why, even though, do you think inflation is the issue? Do you think that the value of the currency is going to do well or poorly or anything like this? Why you should consider at least shifting away from the US dollar if you are using it. So welcome everyone. I am Michael from Offshore Citizen, and today that is what we're going to discuss. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the banking environment, the global kind of political currency type situation, and talk about maybe some alternatives in terms of where it is easy to transact, where it's not easy to transact, what I kind of see, and help you out there in terms of what that means in terms of your banking choices, because this is obviously a really big thing. So before we dive into that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. If you'd like help with setting up bank accounts around the world, setting up the right international corporations for yourself, relocating, getting set up with banking as you relocate, getting residency permits, citizenships, the right strategy and the right implementation, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendar.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net or offshorecapitalist.com. All right, so one of the things that I've noticed, and I've talked a little bit on this channel before, is that the banking system or the financial system has been weaponized. What has effectively happened is that you have a situation where governments have made banks liable for the behaviors of their clients, and therefore banks don't want to deal with a bunch of things. So if you were just say working a normal job, operating domestically, or doing some like traditional brick and mortar operating domestic companies, you may not be aware of like what is happening in the world of banking, but it's really terrible. And literally to the point where what I tell people is when we're designing structures, we need to start with banking as one of the key fundamentals. You don't just get to, I had somebody talking to me yesterday, I think it was, and they were mentioning something about, what do I think about UBS Bank or something? It's like, well, it's not just about like whether you like UBS or not. It's that UBS quite likely won't take you. You have to start with who will take you and then work in reverse, as opposed to say what's the best bank and then go there. It's very different than if you were, say, selecting software, right? It's not the same at all. But beyond that, you have this network effect where even if a bank wants to stand out, okay, they want to compete. So like, for example, the adult industry basically is unserved by banks, completely unserved by banks. It's like impossible to get normal bank accounts through the adult industry. And you might say, okay, well, doesn't this create a big opportunity for another bank to come in and pick up that business? Well, the problem is because of the network effect of banks, if a bank does that, they can risk issues with all the other banks, which means they won't do it. And so because of this, and because of the risks in terms of what it is that people are willing to do with clients, etc., it's just getting less and less reliable to transact in US dollars. Now, some people are concerned about inflation in the US dollar. I don't actually think that's a significant concern for lots of reasons I've done a bunch of videos on before. I don't think you're looking at like the imminent collapse of the US dollar or something like that. And, other people are concerned about, the possibility of, the solvency of the US banking system or something. Again, I'm not particularly concerned about that. But I do think the ability to transact and do business is really important. And what I've noticed increasingly is that you're exposing yourself to business risk when you're operating internationally by dealing with US dollars. You're just making it harder for you. You have less bank accounts you can deal with, etc. And so certainly I've started increasingly to deal with euros and some other currencies in the dealings that I do. And it's just because it's easier for them to get bank accounts, And part of the reason for this is that when it comes to the way that the US dollar system is set up, it all goes through the Federal Reserve, and this is very centralized, etc. Whereas when you look at the European Central Bank, you've got this much more diverse ecosystem of banking. And so anyway, the bottom line for the perspective of this video is just that as we go through building out our business models, right? Obviously, there's some element of, okay, you're going to, have customers who are going to want to pay in a certain currency. Obviously, you're going to be in a situation where certain suppliers are going to be needing to be paid in a certain currency. But to the extent that you can, I think it pays to start moving away, at least diversifying away from US dollars, so that you're not entirely operating there, so that you can receive euros, so that you're charging clients in euros. I'm picking euros arbitrarily. Maybe it's Singapore dollars, maybe it's Swiss francs, maybe it's British pounds, but something else that makes it easier for you to transact, or at least gives you some option. Because if you end up in a situation, I talked to 2 different people, like I said in the last week, where the bank came along and said, oh, there's some risk. Sorry, it's not even the bank, right? It's a sponsoring institution says, no, can't do it. And all of a sudden now, boom, US dollar's gone. Next one, same thing, boom, gone. And the bank says, hey, sorry, we're working on it. We want to try and solve it, but we're having this issue. This is an increasing problem. And so, I would really encourage you to think deeply about the risks to your business operations by operating in that currency. And are there some advantages you can gain simply by choosing another currency? Now, unfortunately, it's not immediately apparent what currency that should be. The most logical one right now is euros, because there's a lot of euro bank account options, and because there's a sufficiently large market and a sufficiently stable currency people are willing to. Now, I'm not especially a lover of the euro per se. That's not really the idea. But as a currency from a business operations standpoint, I think you gain an advantage. So anyway, take that for what it is. If you have comments, we'd love to hear them. Put them below. Check out our websites again, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Send me a message if you have questions. And follow me on Twitter. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.